Elon Musk is not playing around. He just made a comment and it's related to this new FSD version, which was just released, V13.2.7. And this guy here manages tens of billions of dollars and he says, buy the dip. And we just got a massive price target increase from 278 to 426 from Presidential Capital. And if you like seeing news like that, make sure to click the like button right now. And this is that new FSD version I told you about. And this is Elon Musk showing that he is not playing around. He says, and it only gets better from here. Commenting on this video with no interventions. He didn't even touch the steering wheel. He didn't do anything here. This is Omar driving. Elon continues, Tesla is still on track to launch autonomous ride-hailing in Austin in June and roll out to many cities in America by the end of this year. So indeed, he is not playing around. He is re-emphasizing that he still believes that is going to happen. The threshold is achieving safety far in excess of the average human driver, which is inevitable. It's just a matter of time. Ultimately, autonomous cars will be 1,000% safer than human-driven cars. Not only does Omar believe Elon, but he says that every drive is handled without intervention now, and he continues by saying, I can see it to start to exceed my ability in some key areas. Your team was incredibly prescient in betting on computer vision. And that Morgan Stanley today, they're saying that they believe that Tesla's introduction of unsupervised FSD Robotaxi services in Austin, Texas this June will transform investor expectations around the pace of adoption and economic impact of autonomous cars. And June is so close. And while Steve and Mark Ryan likes to make fun of Morgan Stanley by calling them Morgan Stanley, the thing is, when they change their price target significantly on Tesla, there is a very visible change in the stock price. And what I am sort of hearing from Morgan Stanley here is that when Tesla does actually deliver on unsupervised FSD, they will almost certainly increase their price target significantly. So I do agree with James Thorne, and I do believe that this is a buying opportunity. Like he says, buy the dip. And he basically believes that before the year ends, the Tesla stock is going to double. There are some concerns about tariffs, however, and this time we are not talking about Canada, we are talking about China. China is about to impose up to 15% tariffs on US energy and vehicles starting today, supposedly. That's at least what the plan was. But for anyone worried about this, you have to remember that, first of all of the vehicles that are sold in China by Tesla are basically all made in China. To be precise, something like 99.7% of its vehicles sold in China are made in China, except for the Model S and X. So no Model 3 or Model Y is going to be subject to this 15% tariff, and Elon Musk confirms this as well. So I am not worried about tariffs, but that can certainly impact the price of Tesla stock in a short term, but to me that's just a buying opportunity. Late Thursday afternoon or evening, Tesla started rolling out a huge wave of 12.2.6 to customers, and then the next day we learned that Tesla is actually rolling out V13.2.7. So the updates got rolled out so quickly that there was actually some confusion about this. Tesla's code made a comment about an LA to San Francisco drive that Omar just did on supposedly V13.2.7, which was very good. But Omar points out that was actually the previous version. And if Tesla really is going to deploy unsupervised robotaxis this year, then these updates are going to accelerate the frequency of them. And Tesla is making some progress here with insurance. Tesla has just announced a new insurance program in California, and that's good because most of Tesla's customers are in California in the US, or a big portion of them. And these insurance policies will be underwritten by Tesla itself, and if you do switch to Tesla, you will have a small discount of 3%. It will be a one-time discount on your next term's premiums. Now, Tesla insurance has been around in California for a while. However, the different thing this time is that Tesla is actually going to underwrite it itself. For a while, we haven't really heard much progress made by Tesla in the insurance business, but this signals that Tesla is still committed to the insurance business and is committed to getting itself deeper into it. And this is actually a big deal. What you see here is going to be a 5-hour, 35-minute drive, and you can watch this entire drive sped up. Most of it, of course, is highway. However, for the first time, Omar's Tesla took him from Los Angeles to Sand Hills Road in Silicon Valley, and he never touched the steering wheel or pedals once in over 5.5 hours. He points out that it even rained multiple times, so he thinks the Tesla automotive demand from FSD is being massively underestimated. Now, obviously, he did have to stop for charging, but Omar says the car stopped to charge itself, so it actually pulled in and out of the spot. So if other companies are so much ahead of Tesla when it comes to solving full self-driving, how come Tesla is the only company that can actually do this kind of drive without any interventions? In the meantime, however, we still have people like Gary Black that say that FSD is being commoditized. Just to be very clear, there are definitely issues with FSD, and it's definitely not safer than human driving yet. And just now, there was actually an accident which happened on FSD, and here's everything we know about this accident. This is the person that was driving the vehicle. It was a Cybertruck on FSD v13.2.4. The vehicle crashed into a curb and then into a light post. It failed to merge out of a lane that was ending. There was no one on his left and made no attempt to slow down or turn until it had already hit the curb. The driver admits that it was a big fail on his part, obviously, and he asks to not make the same mistake that he made. The crash happened when it was already dark and it was raining, but during the day, this is how the location looks. So probably the Cybertruck was driving here and was supposed to change the lane. Keep in mind it was dark and raining, so I'm not sure how clear the markings were at night and during the rain. And then the Cybertruck crashed into this light pole, I believe. And the damage here seems pretty high, so he must have been driving pretty fast here. And definitely not paying attention if you missed a light post in front of you going that fast. Oh, and it's actually a school zone. Now, Troy has an idea or a theory of what potentially could be contributing to Tesla's degraded performance in this specific case. Detecting rain through vision isn't easy. The system processes real-time visual data to estimate rainfall and adjust the wipers, all while the FSD computer manages complex tasks like object detection and navigation. That's a significant workload, he believes. He also points out that Elon mentioned that Tesla will transition to hardware 5 later this year, although that comment by Elon was made last year in June, so will we really stick to this timeline? I'm not so sure, but it's supposed to have 10 times more processing capability than hardware 4. Here's the post that Elon made in June. And during the Cybercab unveil, it was said that the Cybercab will run hardware 5. Anyway, all of this is making Troy wonder, could the FSD computer have been under heavy load at that moment? And might a dedicated rain sensor have helped in this situation, which costs about $10, he estimates. And Omar here has a take that is probably going to make the driver really upset. This has nothing to do with the rain sensors. FSD works in the rain with no noticeable change in performance, and from my personal experience, I do not notice anything actually noticeable during the rain in terms of its performance being negatively affected. Maybe the car drives a little slower, but I don't notice it being less reliable or anything like that. And it rains a lot here in Vancouver, so a lot of my miles driven on FSD have been in rain. However, every time it rains, I do get a notification, sort of like an alert from Tesla on the computer that FSD performance is degraded, but I just personally do not observe where exactly is it degraded. It maybe drives a little slower. Other than that, I'm not noticing anything. But the thing is, I would drive slower anyway, so to me that's not negatively impacting performance because I would do the same thing anyway. So if anything, it's better that it drives a little slower. It could also be that all other cars drive a little slower, so the car just follows the traffic speed. I'm not really sure exactly the reason for the car driving a tiny little bit slower during the rain, but it happens. And then he drops his honest thoughts. Given that this happened on a Saturday night, my best guess is that the human driver was drunk. Now, the driver says that from the video, he was going at 30 miles per hour, which is actually pretty fast because you're hitting a light post, you know, the thing that shines light. and you're not slowing down at all. That means you were just not paying attention at all. Now, obviously, there's no light on the post itself. It's all up in the air, but still, this part should be more illuminated. So not seeing that at all, that's a bit strange. Maybe he was checking his phone or something like that. I don't know, but clearly he was not paying any attention at all, because if he was, he would have slammed on the brake and the speed would have come down significantly. So definitely be vigilant when you put your car on FSD. Doesn't mean that you can just ignore the road and not pay attention. No. You definitely need to continue paying attention. It's just that when I use FSD, I get so much less tired when I arrive at my destination, especially if the drive is a bit longer. Another thing, just from my personal experience, when I drive on FSD, when it's time to merge like this, I usually don't quite trust FSD because it has done some funny things during merges before. It came to other vehicles way too close. It was way too aggressive, but not in a good way. Kind of like, we're gonna scratch the other vehicle kind of aggressive. So my tendency is, if it's a more difficult merge, I'm going to disengage. And if it's any kind of merge like this, I am paying attention, more attention than if I was just driving without FSD on, because I am thinking the car might do something really silly here. Oh wait, I found another post from the driver. He now says that the car was going at 30 to 45 miles an hour, so I assume it's probably the higher speed. Let's say 40 miles an hour. Or actually, let's take that upper estimate. That's definitely very fast in the city, especially keeping in mind that this was supposedly a school zone. Now, he was driving at night. Regardless, I think you probably can go 45 miles an hour in this location. And personally, I haven't seen FSD actually speed significantly. It can go a little bit over the speed limit, but it only really goes significantly over the speed limit if you push on the accelerator pedal. And this seems to be the intersection from another angle. So FSD probably got disengaged here, and then you had this much distance to brake and slow down, and there was still so much damage. Someone else says, this exact scenario almost happened to me in Houston last week. Luckily, I was paying attention and moved over, but Cybertruck would have probably gone right into a highway wall if I didn't get over. We also know that generally speaking, Cybertruck FSD is not as good as Model Y or Model 3 FSD, so just keep that in mind. Anyway, one thing to watch out for, I believe, is when FSD gets better, a lot more people are going to start using FSD, and a lot more miles will be put on FSD, and the better FSD gets, the less cautious the people will be. Therefore, as FSD gets better, I actually expect to see more and more accidents on FSD as people start to get a false sense of security. I mean, you see clips like this one here, the vehicle just performs incredibly well. And I personally before stated that I'm not going to be surprised when there are FSD accidents. That's just really inevitable, just a matter of time. So just don't get surprised if you see more FSD accidents later. We got some good news from China. The Model Y inventory is sold out in China, meaning you cannot buy a vehicle from inventory. And supposedly Tesla has now received 170,000 orders of the Model Y in China. And there were some headlines saying that Tesla's deliveries in China were down year over year, but you have to remember that the Chinese New Year in 2024 was in February. This year was in late January. On top of that, we have the transition to the new Model Y. So these headlines I would ignore. Tesla just increased the price of the Model X by $5,000 in the US, and it no longer qualifies for the $7,500 tax credit because of the price increase. All new Model X orders now, though, come with free lifetime supercharging. So the vehicle actually just got $12,500 more expensive for most customers. And I think Sawyer has a point here. I wonder if Tesla did this to push potential buyers towards getting a Cybertruck instead, since the X no longer qualifies for the EV credit and the all-wheel drive Cybertruck is $12,500 less expensive than the Model X all-wheel drive for those who qualify. And I think most people would do exactly what Sawyer is saying here. Most will probably get the $12,000 cheaper Cybertruck instead of getting a Model Y if they had to make a decision between the two vehicles. Omar, though, suspects that it's actually the tariffs. There's an argument between James and Farzad. James doesn't subscribe to the thesis that the Tesla FSD software will displace Uber. Uber's brand equity, user base, and market penetration is too great. If anything, I could see Tesla using Uber's platform and maybe paying Uber a licensing fee. I personally disagree with James here. If you're going to pay a licensing fee, Uber has a lot more market cap in its valuation. Lyft, on the other hand, doesn't, and yet it operates in the US regardless of that. So if you're going to pay someone, maybe pay Lyft instead of Uber, because probably they will be happy with less money. And I agree with Prasad here. What brand equity does Uber have besides, man, it's so expensive, but it's more convenient, so I guess I'll use it. Tesla robotaxis will be cheaper, will offer complete privacy, which to me is quite important, be more comfortable and safer. Anytime I'm in an Uber, I just don't want to make any calls. I don't want to pick up calls. It's just my personal preference. But if I'm in a robotaxi, I'm gonna be making some calls and no one is listening to what I'm saying. So I'll definitely be happy with that. James, though, fires back with people know Uber and they use Uber. Uber is established in most markets. Uber has already dealt with regulations. Uber is already on everyone's phones. Tesla will be able to expand much faster and much more broadly using Uber than starting their own network from scratch. But the thing is, people use Uber because they would rather use Uber than a completely broken taxi system. If I have a choice between an Uber or a taxi, I'm always going with Uber when I'm traveling, never a taxi. Largely because I find Uber vehicles to be cleaner than taxis and they smell better. When I get in a taxi, sometimes like, oh, okay. Ooh. Tesla can replace Uber on your phone with literally one click. Tesla will be able to expand much faster than Uber did because Uber has laid out the framework, plus obvious benefits of self-driving tech will allow Tesla to be approved way faster than Uber did in the past. Uber's play was to be a competitor to taxi. Tesla's play is to save thousands of lives per year while doing so at less cost, more comfort, and with privacy. And this then escalates into an argument between Gary Black and Prasad. Tesla doesn't have the platform breadth, 170 million monthly active users, to offer rides anywhere as cheaply as Uber. Many auto manufacturers will achieve unsupervised autonomy at the same time and will be able to supply Uber with unsupervised ride sharing at lower cost. But name one auto manufacturer besides Tesla that has solved real-world AI that can operate anywhere with a software update and can place it on a manufacturing line that cranks millions of cars per year. Me and Prasad will wait. Instead of giving an example, Gary instead says Tesla will be a supplier of cars to Uber along with other manufacturers who solve for generalized and supervised autonomy. It's naive to think Tesla will be the only one who can achieve this. But what makes you think that Tesla will be a supplier? Elon explicitly said that Tesla will only allow Robotaxi to run on its own network. Why would they let Uber use their cars? Uber has 170 million monthly active users, says Gary, but how does that make it cheaper for people to use a robotaxi? Sure, you have the logistics already worked out and approvals, but Tesla can do that regardless of how many active users Uber has. But Gary continues, that size network is what allows Uber to be the low-cost platform. I'm betting Elon will rethink this once he sees other autonomous vehicles going onto Uber's platform. I really don't see Gary being right here in the long term, and I definitely agree with Prasad. I bet you Elon will simply undercut Uber with his vastly superior product and bankrupt Uber. Obviously. With FSD progress, I think this actually describes how critics see it. When we have 1 mile per intervention, critics said, look, there's an intervention. When we went to about 10 miles per intervention, they said, look, there is an intervention. Then they saw an intervention. And the same thing is going to happen when we will be at 1,000 miles and at 10,000 miles and at 100,000 miles and then at 1 million miles. The bears will be paying attention to interventions and the bulls will be paying attention to how many miles before an intervention, because inevitably we will always have an intervention. It just eventually is going to be millions of miles before an intervention. And really, hopefully one day we can get to billions of miles before interventions or accidents. There's also some mysterious vehicle undercover spotted in a video posted by Tesla, and some people are saying that it could be the new affordable model or one of them. To me, looking at the wheels, I think it's a Robotaxi or Cybercab. However, there is this mirror thing here, and typically Cybercabs have no mirrors. So now I'm not so sure if it's definitely a Cybercab. Although just for testing purposes, they might be required to actually put the mirror on the vehicle, so I wouldn't jump to conclusions quickly here either way. Ooh, this same Colorado Tesla store got vandalized for the third time. The first time happened on January 29th, I believe this year, so all very recent, and the second time, February 2nd, and now again. So hopefully police will get them. But if I am gonna get pulled over by the police, if it's a Cybertruck, I don't know whether I would be more scared or whether I would be like, oh, cool, look, it's a Cybertruck. Well, here's some good news for Tesla. Tesla has now finally delivered the roughly 40 new Megapack batteries worth about almost $40 million to Elon Musk's other company, which is XAI to power its massive supercomputer cluster of 200,000 GPUs in Memphis, Tennessee. And I personally believe that Tesla stock is going to $1,000 per share, and then after that, well above it. My name is Matt Postius, and I will see you in the next video, probably on Wednesday.